금요일날 오후 4시 45분이 지나고 있습니다. 오늘은 제가 오전에 양수역 앞에 있는 공원에 가서 은행나무 밑에 제 독서 장소가 또 야외 독서 장소가 그쪽인데 가서 아침도 거기서 먹고 잉어들이 또 시즌이 돼가지고 엄청난 또 번식 작용을 하던데 그것 좀 찍고 이 시간은 제가 뉴욕 타임즈를 난독을 하는 때입니다. 거충 뉴욕 타임즈를 한번 읽겠습니다. Amid Somalia's tentative stability, an auteur of cinema rises. At the shout of action, two actors, costumed in black blazers and sunglasses, erupted into a spirited shouting match, gesticulating wildly as one demanded that the other convince his daughter to marry him. A cameraman and a boom operator, sweaty under scorching sun, moved in to capture the altercation in close-up. Then the director, seated in a foldable chair, removed his handphone and called, cut. Making a musical when you can't hear music. But M said he did not contemplate halting or canceling the plans for the musical. Huey would never let that happen, he said. Huey doesn't give up. It is a project more than a decade in the making, one that began before Louis learned about the disease that has upended his life and given the musical an unexpected sense of urgency. As Louis 73 explained, Zen Buddhists say you need three things: something to love, something to hope for, and something to do. I got plenty to love, he continued, so this is my hope for, and my to do. It keeps me from reflecting on my expletive hearing. Across Southern Asia, a dangerous game is afoot. The new alliance structure that Washington is pursuing for the region won't guarantee peace and stability. This month, President Biden threw one of the most lavish state dinners in Washington's recent memory. Celebrities and billionaires flocked to the White House to dine in honor of Prime Minister Fumio Kishida of Japan, posing for photos in front of an elaborate display of Japanese fans. Jeff Bezos dropped by. Paul Simon provided the entertainment. The spectacle was part of a carefully orchestrated series of events to showcase the renewed U.S.-Japan relationship, and the notable transformation of the United States security alliances in Asia. The next day, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. of the Philippines was also in the U.S. Capitol for the historic U.S.-Japan-Philippines summit, during which new trilateral security partnership was announced. Both events were directed at the same audience, China. Over the past several years, Washington has built a series of multilateral security arrangements like this in the Asia-Pacific region. Although U.S. officials claim that the recent mobilization of allies and partners is not aimed at China. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. Indeed, Mr. Kishida emphasized in a speech to Congress on April 11th that China presents the greatest strategic challenge both to Japan and to the international community. But Washington's pursuit of an increasingly complex lattice of security is a dangerous game. Those ties include upgrade in defense capabilities, more joint military exercises, deeper intelligence sharing, new initiatives on defense production and technology cooperation, and the enhancement of contingency planning and military coordination. All of that may make Beijing more cautious about the blatant use of military force in the region. But the new alliance structure is not on its own a long-term guarantor of regional peace and stability, and could even increase the risk of stumbling into a conflict. In China, auto factories sit empty. Surge in electric vehicles has led to a steep decline in gasoline car production. On the outskirts of Chongqing, Western China's largest city, sits a huge symbol of the country's glut of car factories. It's a complex of great buildings, nearly a square mile in size. The thousands of employees who used to work there have moved on. Its crimson loading docks are closed, making a musical when you can't hear music. An 80s rock hitmaker has let initial despair at the diagnosis get in the way. After H learned that the syndrome of the inner ear called Meniere's disease had caused him significant hearing loss and left him unable to play or hear music. He faced the difficult task of having to tell his friends and peers. Arguments on immunity tested Trump and justice. Former president can lose his Supreme Court case in ways that seemed like the win. In July 2020, Mr. Trump lost the case, but the loss was a kind of victory. The court sent the case back to the lower courts for more analysis, running out the clock. In a concurring opinion, two of Mr. Trump's appointees, Justice Brett, joined by Justice Neal, summarized the course of the mixed message this way. The court today unanimously concluded that the president does not possess absolute immunity from a state criminal subpoena, but also unanimously agrees that this case should be remanded to the district court. Deluge. Stranded residents in Nairobi, Kenya this week. Torrents of the torrential rains and the flooding have affected parts of the country, leaving dozens of people dead or injured and more than 40,000 displaced, officials said. The forerunner and the prototype book review, The Rule Breaker, The Life and the Times of Barbara and Walters. Much of the material in The Rule Breaker, The Life and the Times of Barbara Walters has been told before, with persuasive narrative controlled by the late television journalist herself in her Dish 2008 memoir, Audition. Don't let that stop the reader of this through compassionate biography by Susan Page. It's a valuable document, sobering, where auditions aimed for sassy. Barbara Walters on NBC's Today show in 1976. She died in 2022 at 93. Pan America cancels prize giving over Gaza. Weeks of public criticism had led nearly half of the nominees to withdraw. We greatly respect that writers have followed their consciences, whether they chose to remain as nominees. In a letter that Pan America leadership received last week, 30 of the 87 nominated writers and translators, including 9 of the 10 nominees for one prize, criticized the group's disgraceful inaction on the situation in Gaza, accusing it of clinging to this ingenious facade of neutrality while parroting that the latter characterized as the Israeli government propaganda. The letter also called for the resignation of the group's longtime chief executive and its president, the novelist Jay, along with that of the group's executive committee. an ingredient with recipe-changing power. It also adds depth and complexity to savory dishes like the mollies and guisos stews, giving them smoky, cuppy, and loomy flavors. Loomy flavors. Drinking in the pleasures of Chicago. The motto of Chicago ought to be too much to do, not enough time. That's how I feel whenever I visit, whether restaurants, architecture, museums, or music. Chicago overflows with wonderful option, and that certainly extend to great place to drink the wine. On a recent trip that unfortunately coincided with a biting Arctic blast, I sought out warm refuges with superb food and intriguing wine list. I was looking for casual, comfortable places that served full meals and upper the list with a clear personality. I omitted the so-called classic, expensive Michelin-starred restaurants where you would expect to find extensive wine list. These 8 places stood out as distinctive emblems of Chicago's singular Midwestern character. College athletes may soon face hiring and firing. A U.S. Labor Board ruling could change how students and schools conduct sports. 5 or 6 days a week at each level of play, he was immersed in football activities, lifting weight, practice, film study, physical therapy, and playing games. There is travel on charter on the jet, free tickets for friends and relatives, robust coaching steps at setting rules. As the E sat on a witness stand last week, he detailed the similarities between his experience last season as a rookie tight end for the Arizona Cardinals and the 4 years he had spent playing football at Stanford University. Rock Hall of Fame announced the inductees. Sure, Dave Matthews Band and a tribe called Quest are part of the class of 2024. The latest crop of stars will officially join the Pantheon in a company on October 19th at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland, where the Hall's affiliated museum is also located. Old chums again trying to live it up. The new Broadway revival of the 1966 musical revisits a Berlin nearing disaster. The problem for me is that cabaret has a distinctive profile already. The extreme one up the hill frequently defaces it. Rapa assault seems inevitable. Berlin. Israel insists it's necessary to dismantle Hamas and has proposed the evacuation. Should Israel take the Rafah, the question of who will govern Gaza after the fighting ends remains unanswered. A brazen display of modest power. Prime Minister's vilification of India's Muslims shows he sees few checks on control. Partners increasingly turn a blind eye to what Modi is doing as they embrace India as a counterweight to China. In Asia, a dangerous game. For a start, the United States and key allies like Japan should make a sustained effort to establish a durable crisis prevention and management dialogue with China, involving each nation's foreign policy and security agencies. None of this will be easy, given the intense suspicion that now exists between Beijing and Washington and its allies. But new thinking and new diplomatic efforts could incentivize China to reciprocate in meaningful ways. At the very least, it's necessary to try. Focusing on military deterrence alone won't work. Trying to find a way to cooperate with China is the best way, perhaps the only way to steer the world away from disaster. A mixed legacy as New York turns 400. Commemorating a milestone is complicated by a history of slavery and colonialism. This spring is the 400th anniversary of the founding of New York, or to be precise, of the Dutch colony that became New York once the English took it over. Is a noteworthy milestone. That settlement gave rise to a city unencumbered by old ways and powered by pluralism and capitalism, the postmodern city, you might say. Don't feel bad though if you are unaware of the birthday. Organizers of commemorative events have themselves been in a quandary about how to observe it, a quandary that has become familiar in recent years. Yes, the New Netherlands, the Dutch colony, and New Amsterdam, the city that became New York, created the condition for New York's accent and helped to shape America as a place of tolerance, multi-ethnicity, and free trade. May the best victim win. Never has our culture made the claiming of complaint such as animating force. People have always fought over unequal access to scarce resources, yet never has our culture made the claiming of complaint such an animating force, a near compulsory zero-sum game in which every party feels as if it's been uniquely abused. No one has the urge to leverage powerlessness as a form of power felt quite so universal, more pervasive on the left, if considerably more threatening on the right. But as Sadar says, just because you are offended doesn't mean you are right. Being oppressed doesn't necessarily make you good, and more than might is right. Having been victimized doesn't give you a pass. This acrimony has only intensified in the past few years. The battlefield keeps widening. What begins as a threat often descends into protest, riots, and physical violence. It's difficult for anyone to wade through all of this without feeling wronged in one way or another. But it wrongs us all. And if we continue to mistake the grievance for righteousness, we only set ourselves up for more of the same. Managing chronic abdominal pain with dietary tracts. Irritable bowel syndrome is one of the most common and perplexing conditions gastroenterologists treat. It affects an estimated 6% of people in the United States, with more women diagnosed more men, and the cause symptoms so debilitating they can be hard to ignore, including abdominal pain, bloating, diarrhea, and the constipation. What is the IBS? How it treated? Some researchers also support simpler dietary tracts, such as eating more slowly, having regular, smaller, and more frequent meals, and limiting coffee, tea, carbonated beverages, alcohol, and fatty or spicy food, said as a dietitian and postdoctoral researchers at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, who led the new study. Getting good and the grimy. Mud, soil, dirt, earth, they can help your mood, microbiome, and the more. Gardening, a way to get some dirt at a time, has been associated with reduced depression. If you don't have an outdoor space, find a place to pick your own produce, said. When we are touching soil, or even just out in nature, we are breathing in a tremendous amount of microbial diversity, said the sea. A professor of integrative physiology at the University of Colorado Boulder, or create a habitat to the garden, which use native plants to attract and feed wildlife, said the M, who lead gardening habitat program for the National Wildlife Federation. A lot of people still have this nervousness around touching soil, he said, but for him it makes me happy. Tips for overcoming a hatred of running is common knowledge in my household that Monday at 5:55 a.m. is the worst time of the week. That's because Monday is a running day and I hate the running. Reprogram your brain. Reprogram your brain. Behavioral scientists have emphasized the importance of temptation bundling. Temptation bundling. That's a fancy term for treating yourself every time you do something that you don't want to. But what we haven't said is that bundling can actually train your brain as if you were a drooling dog. Get a dog. Some days, even podcasts and promises of breaks aren't enough to get me out the door. For that, I have a snitch, a slightly dopey, highly enthusiastic dog. Snitching needs the exercise like Cookie Monster, but they need sugar. And if I don't take her running, there's a good chance she will take it out on my shoes. Research suggested that dog owners may live longer than the rest of us, presumably because 40 friends make us happier and more active. And while some are skeptical of this, I would argue it's all about the kind of dog you get. If you are looking for a running pet, I recommend a breed that's athletic, but not too athletic. A pug is no good, but don't make my mistake either. College protesters make divestment from Israel a rallying cry. A wide range of companies. Last week, the Cornell Daily Sun endorsed calls for university to divest from arms manufacturers directly involved in Israel's campaign. Cornell should in no way support a war that has been waged with callous disregard for civilian lives, the paper wrote. Does divestment work? The answer depends on how you define success. If Columbia's investment are so small as to not make a material impact, then why do we have them at all? Said that we, a second-year doctoral student in history at the university, there should be $0, period, invested in all kind of genocide. Protesters at Columbia University are demanding the sale of holdings in funds they say are profiting from Israel's invasion of Gaza. Lifeline to Ukraine could arrive within days, but U.S. weapons package will not include anything Zelensky had requested. Ukraine officials seem skeptical that weapons will be delivered quickly or consistently over the coming months. What Ukraine will get. The Pentagon said on Wednesday it would rush a $1 billion military aid package to Ukraine, including a shoulder-fired Stinger surface-to-air missile and other defense ammunition, 155mm shells, Javelin anti-tank guided missile, cluster munitions, and battlefield vehicles. The funding helps, she said, but questioned whether all the weapons and equipment that it would pay for is ready for delivery. Unfortunately, no, she said. A town scorned is touched by a beautiful game. Luton, England. Soccer upgrade may alter perception of spot, voted worst place to live in Britain. The place that you see on the news, I don't recognize it. There's harmony here. There's a sense of community. For a time, the town was unwittingly and unwillingly projected as the heartland of the nationalist group he founded, the English Defence League. A glut of unused auto factories. The Chinese auto industry is experiencing a revolution. The old internal combustion capacity is at the dying. Being worth billions isn't always enough. In Silicon Valley, a case of insider trading brings $415,726 and legal charges. The wager paid off. Sun Workstation filled a niche between the rudimentary personal computers of the era and the high-end mainframe from IBM and others. Later, Sun expanded into computers that manage other computers, called servers. At its peak in the late 1990s, dot-com bubble, Sun had a stock market valuation of $200 billion. While Andy may have knowingly or accidentally made the mistake, he said he will always be able to say he did real good. The ghost of the 1968 anti-war movement returns. The level of suffering in the war in Gaza is unacceptable. Many young people are planning to keep protesting. Of course, the semesters and students go home for the summer. But their opposition to the war didn't end with the academic year. Anti-war groups are already planning large protests at the convention. On October 7th, about 1,200 people in Israel were killed and about 240 people were taken hostage in a Hamas attack. I hid the war in Ukraine from my son. When Russian forces poured in, I couldn't explain why one of my homelands was invading the other. I decided to say nothing about the war until and unless he asked. 1 month later, Russian forces poured into the Ukraine. Let this little brain know about suffering, but not about Russia's betrayal, not yet. Behind the secret push to pass the TikTok law, U.S. lawmakers huddled in private to avoid the lobbyists and bulletproof the bill. The last stage was a race to the president's desk that led some to nickname it the Thunder Run. So the committee hatched a strategy, win the support of Democrats, the White House, and the Justice Department for the new bill. And the last stage, a race to the president's desk that led some aide to nickname the bill the Thunder Run, played out in 7 weeks from when it was publicly introduced, remarkably fast for Washington. You don't get many opportunities like this on a major issue. Europe aims to lower rate despite the Fed. Policymakers are citing cooling inflation as a sign the central bank can act. We can't ignore what's happening in the U.S., but it's not the totality of what affects the European economy. Unless something dramatic happens, the ECB is on track to cut rates in June, he added. I will prefer small movements than big moves and then stopping, because it sends a clear message to investors and is more conservative in the face of economic uncertainty, he said. But there's nothing that prevents us to move quicker at the beginning and then slowing down. How gender divide could play out in U.S. election. Trump respected women, most men say in poll, but female voters disagree. This month, the New York Times Anna College poll asked voters how much they think former President Donald J. Trump respected women. A lot, some not much, or not at all. The formula for any Democrat in a closer race is to win women by more than they lose the men. A majority of men, 54%, said that Trump respected women either a lot or some. Just 31% of women saw things that way. Trump, a man known for bragging about grabbing women's private parts, and on trial in connection with the cover-ups of a sex scandal involving a porn star, has long symbolized a kind of machismo that too many people read as the misogyny. But disparity is important to understand in an election that already seems primed to turn on the question of just how big the gender gap between Trump, who draws more support from men, and President Biden, who leads among women, is going to be. Our poll found that Trump had a 20 percentage point lead among men, while Biden had a 16 percentage point lead among women. Democrats are hoping that their renewed focus on issues like the abortion rights and subsidies for child and family care might help to expand the gender gap in their favor. They need anti-Trump voters just as much as they need Biden supporters. I don't think he respected women, as said of Trump. Republicans in general think of women as a vessel, and want to go back to the 50s. Do I want that? No. Casey, 49, a chap from Michigan who is planning on voting for Trump, also pointed to Trump's personal staffing choices to back up his belief that Trump has lots of respect for women. Five moments of the hush money trial so far. The initial day of Donald J. Trump's criminal trial in New York, the first for an American president, was a high-intensity spectacle. A jury was seated, opening statements made, and the first witness began testifying. Mr. Trump, who faced up to 4 years behind bars, if convicted, is charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records for the way in which he accounted for the repayment to his former personal lawyer. Mr. Cohen had channeled money to a porn star who was shopping her story of a sexual encounter with Mr. Trump. Prosecutors say the payment was meant to cover up a scandal that could have derailed Mr. Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Here are 5 of the most memorable things that have been said in court so far. We have our jury. The defendant, Donald Trump, orchestrated a criminal scheme to corrupt the 2016 presidential election. There is nothing wrong with trying to influence an election. It's called the democracy. You are losing all credibility with the court. I would run or publish positive stories about Mr. Trump, and I would publish negative stories about his opponents. That last assertion that Mr. Trump was attempting to obey prompted the utterance from the judge that no lawyer wants to hear.